The drive took 11 hours from the regional office. I stopped twice for fuel and once to eat at a diner where the waitress warned me about the weather turning. She said the mountains got mean in October. I thanked her and left a reasonable tip and got back on the road. The last 40 miles were unpaved. My truck suspension complained through every pothole and washout. The GPS lost signal at mile marker 6, but they had told me that would happen. I followed the printed directions instead, counting turnoffs by the reflector posts. Green, green, yellow, red, then left onto the fire road. The paperwork in my glove box said Sector 14. The locals called it the Fold, though nobody at the regional office explained why. I needed the job. That was the simple version. The complicated version involved a divorce settlement, a defaulted loan on a house I no longer lived in, and a skill set that translated poorly to anything besides government work in remote places. 23 years in forestry management, 8 of them supervisory. When the posting came across my desk, Sector Warden, Grade 7, hardship pay included, housing provided. I filled out the application before lunch. The cabin appeared at 4:17 in the afternoon, exactly where the map said it would be. Single story, metal roof, solar array on the south face. A diesel generator hummed behind the woodshed. The door was unlocked. Inside, 1 cot, 1 desk, 1 wood stove, 1 radio console, 1 bathroom with a chemical toilet. Everything painted the same industrial green. The lockbox was on the desk. My predecessor had left the combination taped to the underside of the keyboard, which seemed careless until I opened it and found only a laminated sheet and a ring of 14 keys. Each key was tagged with a grid number. The laminated sheet was dense with small print. I sat down and read it through twice before the sun went below the ridgeline. The sheet was titled Sector 14 Operational Guidelines. The header listed a revision date of March of the previous year. Below that, a brief paragraph stated that compliance was mandatory and that questions should be directed to dispatch on Channel 4 between 8 in the morning and 6 in the evening only. No other channels. No exceptions. The rules followed. I will copy them here as I found them. 1. Radio check-ins occur at 6 in the morning, 12 noon, 6 in the evening, and 11 at night. Use your assigned call sign followed by Sector Clear or Sector Active. If you miss a check-in by more than 4 minutes, dispatch will attempt contact 3 times at 2-minute intervals. If you do not respond, they will log you as non-responsive, and a recovery team will be dispatched within 72 hours. 2. If you encounter any person within Sector 14 who is not scheduled to be present, do not approach within 50 feet. Ask them to state their name, their assigned sector, and the current date. If any answer is incorrect, or if they cannot answer, retreat to the cabin immediately. And radio dispatch with a code yellow. Do not run. Walk at a normal pace without looking back. 3. The observation window on the north wall must remain uncovered between sunrise and sunset. Between sunset and sunrise, the curtain must be drawn and secured with the brass clips. Do not look through the observation window after dark, even if you hear sounds that suggest someone is outside. 4. If you hear your own name called from outside the cabin between the hours of 11 at night and 5 in the morning, do not respond. Do not acknowledge the voice in any way. Continue your current task as though you heard nothing. 5. The basement access hatch in the northeast corner of the cabin is padlocked. The key is on your ring, tagged B-14. Do not open this hatch between October and April. During other months, the hatch may be opened only during daylight hours and only if you can see the sun directly. 6. Patrol routes must follow the marked trails only. Do not deviate from the trail for any reason, including apparent emergencies, injured wildlife, or requests for assistance from individuals you encounter. If an individual requires assistance, radio dispatch and remain on the trail until support arrives. 7. The supply shed is located 40 yards southeast of the cabin. It may be accessed freely during daylight hours. After dark, the shed may only be accessed if you first complete a perimeter circuit of the cabin, counting your steps aloud. The count must reach exactly 212 steps. If you reach the cabin door having counted more or fewer steps, do not enter the shed until the following morning. 8. At the start of each shift, mark your current location on the sector map with a red dot. At the end of each shift, mark it again with a blue dot. If the red and blue dots do not align, radio dispatch immediately with a code orange, 9. Wildlife in Sector 14 may occasionally behave in unusual ways. If you observe an animal moving in a direction inconsistent with its apparent gait, for example, a deer walking forward while facing backward, or a bird flying in a straight line without wing movement, do not approach. Note the grid location, time, and species in your log. Do not follow the animal. 10. The perimeter lights activate automatically at sunset. If any light fails to activate, or if any light activates more than twice in a 3-minute period, seal all windows and doors, and do not leave the cabin until sunrise. Radio dispatch with a code red and wait for instruction. 11. Between 2:15 in the morning and 2:45 in the morning, do not use the radio for any purpose. This window is non-negotiable, including emergencies. If an emergency occurs during this window, document it in your log and radio dispatch at 2:46, 12. If you find personal items that do not belong to you, clothing, equipment, identification, leave them where they are. Mark the location on your map and radio dispatch. Do not touch the items. Do not read any written materials you find. 13. The previous warden may have left notes or logs in the cabin. These are not official guidance. You may read them if you choose, but do not follow any instruction contained in them unless it appears in this document. 14. People sometimes appear in Sector 14 who have already left, or who are currently assigned elsewhere, or who do not exist in any personnel record. These appearances are documented and expected. Follow Rule 2. Protocols, regardless of who appears or what they say. There is no exception to this rule. I set the laminated sheet down. Outside, the last light was draining from the sky. I checked my watch, 5:43, and crossed to the north window to draw the curtain. The brass clips were stiff. I worked them closed, one by one, and tried not to think about why someone had installed clips on a curtain. The radio crackled at 6 in the evening exactly. I keyed the mic and spoke my call sign, 14 Alpha, followed by sector clear. Dispatch acknowledged in a flat male voice. The exchange took 4 seconds. I ate a cold dinner from the supply crate and inventoried my equipment by lantern light. Flashlight, batteries, flares, first aid kit, water purification tablets, 72 hours of freeze-dried rations, a handheld GPS that did not work, a compass that did, binoculars, a survival blanket, 200 feet of nylon rope, a multi-tool, and a sidearm I hoped I would never need. I logged everything in the leather-bound book I found in the desk drawer. The previous entries stopped abruptly in August. At 11, I made the evening check-in. Dispatch acknowledged. I locked the door with the key tagged C14, which the guidelines did not mention, but which seemed reasonable. I lay down on the cot, fully clothed, and listened to the generator hum and the wind in the pines, and nothing else. Sleep came eventually. I dreamed of the diner waitress, except her face was wrong. The features were too far apart, the mouth slightly too wide, and she kept asking me to count backward from 212. The first week passed without incident. I learned the routines, check-ins, patrols, inventory, logs. The trails were well marked and the weather held. I saw deer, a black bear at distance, a family of ravens that followed me through Grid 7 on Tuesday. I marked my locations on the map each morning and evening. The dots aligned. On day 8, I heard my name. It was 2:23 in the morning. I know because I checked my watch before I checked myself. The voice came from outside the north window, muffled by the curtain, but clear enough. My full name, first and last, spoken the way my mother used to say it when I was in trouble as a kid. I did not respond. I lay on the cot and stared at the ceiling and listened to my own heartbeat. The voice called again at 2:27 and again at 2:31. Each time it sounded slightly different, first concerned, then irritated, then something I can only describe as patient, like it had all the time in the world. At 2:42, the voice stopped. I did not sleep again. At 6 in the morning, I made my check-in and reported the incident. Dispatch logged it and told me to continue standard operations. They did not sound surprised. The second incident occurred 3 days later. I was on patrol in Grid 9, midway through the Western Loop, when I saw a man standing at the edge of the trail about 60 yards ahead. He wore the standard issue jacket of a sector warden. He did not move. I stopped and checked my binoculars. The man was middle-aged, balding, with a gray beard, and a posture I recognized from the employee photo in my orientation packet. His name was Harold Vance. He had been the Sector 14 warden before me. According to the regional office, Harold Vance had transferred to a desk job in April. According to the man standing on the trail, he was right here, right now, wearing a jacket with an emblem that showed a mountain and 3 trees, instead of the current design, which showed a mountain and 4. I did not approach within 50 feet. I called out the questions: name, sector, date. Harold Vance, he said. His voice carried clearly through the still air. Sector 14, October 9th. The date was October 14th. I backed up the trail the way I came, walking at a normal pace without looking back. It took 47 minutes to reach the cabin. I radioed dispatch with a code yellow and gave them the grid location. They acknowledged and told me to remain inside until further notice. The further notice came at 3 in the afternoon, when a voice on Channel 4 informed me that a patrol had swept Grid 9 and found nothing. I was cleared to resume operations. That evening, I read the previous warden's notes. Rule 13 had warned me not to follow them, but it had not forbidden reading. The notes were in a composition notebook stuffed in the back of the desk drawer, handwritten in tight, precise script. The first entry was dated January of the previous year. The last was August 22nd. Most of the entries were routine: weather, wildlife, equipment maintenance. But scattered between the mundane observations were other notes: margin annotations, asterisks, and underlines. March 4th. Saw myself on the ridge at 09:30. Distance approximately 200 yards. Did not approach. Radio check confirmed I was in cabin at that time. April 11th, supply run to grid 2. Counted 212 steps on return circuit. Entered shed, found items rearranged. Salt container moved from shelf 3 to shelf 1. Did not touch. Logged for dispatch. May 29th, voice from north window, 0217. Sounded like my brother. My brother died in 2019. June 14th, found my own jacket on the trail in grid 5. Tag read, Vance, HID number, correct. Did not touch. Dispatch sent recovery team. No further explanation provided. July 30, the observation window. Looked through it at 22:33 by accident. Dropped flashlight, reflexive glance. Something was looking back. Did not see details. Did not want to. Drew curtain immediately. Reported to dispatch. They added the brass clips the next week. August 22nd. I am requesting transfer. The appearances are increasing. 3 in the past week. 2 of them were me. One of them was someone I did not recognize, but who knew my name, my daughter's birthday, and the last thing I said to my wife before she left. I do not know how they know these things. I do not want to know. The notes ended there. I closed the composition book and put it back in the drawer. I did not follow any instruction it contained, but I began to understand the shape of things. The next month followed a pattern I came to recognize. Anomalies appeared, and I complied. A light flickered at the perimeter at 10:17 one night, and I sealed the cabin and waited until dawn. A bird flew overhead without moving its wings, and I logged it and continued on the trail. A voice that sounded like my ex-wife asked me to open the door at 3 a.m, and I lay still until it stopped. The rules worked. That was the thing I kept reminding myself. They worked because someone had tested them, had failed, had learned. Every rule existed because something had happened to make it necessary. On November 3rd, I received an amendment. The radio crackled at my evening check-in, and instead of the usual acknowledgement, dispatch read a new set of guidelines. I wrote them down as they spoke. Amendment 1. If you encounter more than one instance of the same individual simultaneously, do not acknowledge either. Retreat immediately and maintain a minimum distance of 100 feet from both. Amendment 2. The radio silence window has been extended. Do not use the radio between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. This supersedes the previous window. Amendment 3. If any appearance speaks the phrase, "let me in," or any variation thereof, cover your ears and hum continuously until the voice stops. Do not listen to any words that follow. Amendment 4. The supply shed is now restricted after dark, regardless of step count. Access is permitted only between sunrise and 4 in the afternoon. Amendment 5. If you find a written message addressed to you by name, do not read it. Burn it immediately using the fire kit in your supplies. Radio dispatch after destruction is complete. Amendment 6. The brass clips on the observation window curtain must now be checked twice after sunset. Once immediately after drawing the curtain, and once at exactly 11 at night. If any clip is loose, re-secure it without looking through the gap. Amendment 7. Patrol routes are suspended between November 5th and November 15th. Remain in the cabin during this period. Rations have been adjusted accordingly. Amendment 8. If you hear footsteps circling the cabin, count them. If the count reaches exactly 144 before stopping, do nothing. If the count exceeds or falls short of 144, radio dispatch immediately with a code black. I asked dispatch what had prompted the amendments. The voice on the other end paused for 4 seconds before responding. Sector activity has increased. The adjustments are precautionary. I did not ask further questions. The patrol suspension began 2 days later. I stocked the cabin with firewood, inventoried my rations, 62 meal packets, 36 liters of water, 108 batteries, and settled in for 10 days of waiting. On the first night, I heard the footsteps. They began at 1:47 in the morning, a steady rhythm circling the cabin at a distance of perhaps 10 feet. I lay on the cot and counted. 43, 57, 81, 99, 120, 136, 140, 142, 143. The footsteps stopped. I waited. The silence stretched for 2 minutes, then 5. I did not reach for the radio. The count had not reached 144, but it had not exceeded it either. The instructions were specific, exactly 144 or more, or fewer. 143 fell into the fewer category. I keyed the mic at 3:01 and reported. Dispatch logged the count and told me to monitor. The footsteps returned the next night and the next. Each time the count was different. 139, 151, 147. Each time I radioed dispatch. Each time they logged it and told me to monitor. On the 4th night, the count reached exactly 144. I lay still until dawn, as the rules instructed, and did nothing. When the sun rose, I checked the perimeter. There were no tracks in the frost. There was no sign anyone had walked there at all. The patrol suspension ended on November 15th. I returned to the trails and found them unchanged. The markers were in place. The distances were correct. I completed the western loop in 4 hours and 12 minutes, exactly as scheduled. In grid 7, I found a note. It was pinned to a trail marker with a rusted nail. The paper was weathered, but still legible. My name was written across the front in handwriting I did not recognize. I did not read it. I pulled my fire kit from my pack and burned it on the spot, watching the paper curl and blacken until nothing remained but ash. I stirred the ash with a stick and scattered it off the trail. Then I radioed dispatch. 14 Alpha to base. Message destroyed per Amendment 5. Grid 7, mile marker 2.3. Acknowledged 14 Alpha. Log the location and continue. I continued. That evening, I found a second note inside the cabin. It was on my desk, centered on the blotter, weighted with a stone I did not recognize. My name was on the front. The paper was clean and white, not weathered. It had not been there when I left. The door was still locked. The windows were still sealed. The curtain was still clipped. I burned the note without reading it and radioed dispatch. The voice on the other end was silent for 6 seconds before responding. 14 Alpha, confirm the cabin was secured when you departed. Confirmed, locked and sealed at 0614. Confirm no sign of entry. No sign of entry. Windows intact. Door locked when I returned. Another silence. Then, log the incident. Continue standard operations. Report any additional findings immediately. I logged the incident. I did not sleep that night. The temperature dropped through late November. I kept the wood stove burning and wore my thermal layers on patrol. The trails hardened with frost, and the streams in Grid 4 froze over enough to walk across, though the rules did not permit me to test this. On November 28th, I received a visitor. The radio crackled at 9 in the morning with a transmission I did not expect. A resupply team would arrive by noon, accompanied by a trainee for orientation. I was to expect 2 individuals, both verified by dispatch, both carrying identification that I was required to inspect before allowing entry. I spent the morning cleaning the cabin and reviewing the protocols for visitor verification. The guidelines had a section I had not studied closely, Appendix C, Personnel Protocols, which specified the exact sequence of questions and inspections required. At 11:42, I heard an engine on the fire road. I watched from the observation window as a truck identical to mine pulled into the clearing. 2 figures emerged. I waited until they approached within 30 feet, then stepped onto the porch. "Hold there," I said. "Names and identification." The first figure was a woman in her 40s, broad-shouldered and weathered. She held up her badge without complaint. "Rivera, Supply Coordinator, badge number 4271. The second figure was younger, early 20s, with the uncertain posture of someone who had never worked a remote post. "Chen, Trainee, badge number 9153. I crossed to them and inspected the badges. The photos matched. The badge numbers matched the manifest dispatch had radioed an hour earlier. The jacket emblems showed a mountain and 4 trees. "Current date," I said. "November 28th, Rivera answered. "November 28th, Chen repeated. I checked my watch. 11:46. The answers were correct. "Welcome to Sector 14, I said. "Come inside. We have a lot to cover." Rivera stayed 2 hours. She inventoried the supplies she had brought: 48 meal packets, 24 liters of water, 72 batteries, 6 flares, 2 replacement bulbs for the perimeter lights, and departed before the afternoon light began to fade. Chen stayed. Training took 3 days. I walked Chen through every rule, every amendment, every protocol. I quizzed him on response times and verification sequences. I made him practice the radio check-ins until he could recite his call sign, 14 Bravo, without hesitation. I explained the footsteps, the voices, the notes. He asked questions I could not answer. "What are they?" I shook my head. "The rules don't say. The rules just tell you what to do." "But you must have a theory." "I have observations. I observe the rules. I observe what happens when I follow them. That's enough." Chen was quiet for a long time after that. On the second night of his training, the voice came. We were both awake. I had scheduled overlapping watches to demonstrate the protocol, when the sound drifted through the north window. It was Chen's name, spoken in a woman's voice that cracked with emotion. Chen sat up. His face went pale. "That's my mother," he said. I put a hand on his arm. "No, it's not. That's her voice. I know my own mother's voice." The voice called again, pleading now, asking Chen to come outside, to help her, to open the door. I watched Chen's hands clench and unclench. I watched his eyes dart to the door. "Rule 4, I said. Do not acknowledge. Do not respond." "She sounds hurt." Rule 4. Chen closed his eyes. His breathing was ragged. The voice called 3 more times, each iteration slightly different, as though it were testing variations: concerned, angry, desperate, calm. At 2:41, it stopped. Chen did not speak for the rest of the night. In the morning, I found him at the desk, writing in the log. "I almost opened the door," he wrote. "I don't know what stopped me." I knew. The rules stopped him. That was the point. On the 3rd day, Chen accompanied me on patrol. I kept him close, within arm's reach, and narrated every decision. This is the trail marker for Grid 6. We do not leave the trail. If we see something off the trail, we note it in the log and keep moving. He nodded and wrote everything down. At mile marker 3.7, we saw the man. He was standing just off the trail, perhaps 15 feet into the trees. He wore a warden's jacket. His face was Chen's face. Chen stopped walking. I grabbed his arm. "Don't look at it. That's me." "I know. Keep walking." "How is that me? I'm right here." "Rule 2. We do not approach. We retreat. Now." I pulled him back up the trail. The figure did not move. It did not call out. It simply watched, wearing Chen's face, with Chen's expression of blank incomprehension. We reached the cabin at 2:17 in the afternoon. I radioed dispatch with a code yellow and reported the location. They acknowledged and told us to remain inside. Chen was shaking. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we wait. They'll send someone to sweep the grid. And then? And then we continue. That's the job, Chen. You see things. You follow the rules. You continue." He was quiet. Then, the previous warden transferred to a desk job. Is that what happens? You do this long enough, and they let you leave. I thought about Harold Vance standing on the trail with the wrong emblem and the wrong date. I thought about the notes in the composition book, the transfer request, the silence that followed. "Yes," I said. "That's what happens." It was not entirely a lie. The sweep team found nothing in Grid 6. Chen completed his orientation and was assigned to Sector 11, 60 miles north. Rivera returned with the transport on December 1st, and I helped Chen load his gear into the truck. "Remember the rules," I said. "I won't forget. Not just remember. Follow. There's a difference." He nodded. Rivera started the engine. I watched the truck disappear down the fire road, and then I was alone again. December brought snow. The trails became difficult, and dispatch reduced patrol frequency to 3 times weekly. I spent more time in the cabin, monitoring the radio, checking the perimeter lights, counting footsteps. The footsteps came almost every night now. The counts varied: 132, 158, 144, 127. I logged each one. Dispatch acknowledged each log. Nothing else was said. On December 14th, I found a jacket on the porch. It was folded neatly, placed directly in front of the door, as though someone had left it there intentionally. The tag read Chen, M. The badge number matched the one I had verified 2 weeks earlier. I did not touch it. I photographed it with a digital camera from my kit, logged the location and time, and radioed dispatch. They sent a recovery team the following morning. The team leader, a man named Torres, examined the jacket without touching it, bagged it in heavy plastic, and loaded it into his truck. "Any idea how it got here?" he asked. I shook my head. "I went to bed at 11:03. The porch was clear. I woke at 5:47. It was there. Door was locked. Door was locked." Torres wrote something in his notebook. "Chen's still at Sector 11. Checked in this morning. Says he hasn't lost any gear." I did not know how to respond to that, so I said nothing. "Be careful," Torres said. "Activity's up across the board. You're not the only sector seeing an increase." "What does that mean?" Torres looked at the tree line, then back at me. "It means follow the rules, all of them, every time." He climbed into his truck and drove away. That night, I double-checked every clip on the curtain. I counted my steps around the perimeter 3 times, getting 212 each time. I inventoried my supplies down to the last battery. I lay awake until 3 in the morning, listening for footsteps. They did not come. The silence was worse. On December 20th, dispatch transmitted the emergency protocols. The voice on the radio was flat and unhurried, as though it were reading from a script. I wrote down every word. Emergency Protocol 1. If the perimeter lights extinguish completely and do not reactivate within 3 minutes, proceed to the center of the cabin. Draw a circle on the floor with the salt from your supply kit. Remain inside the circle until sunrise. Do not step outside the circle for any reason. Emergency Protocol 2. If you receive a radio transmission on any channel other than Channel 4, do not respond. Turn off the radio immediately and wait 15 minutes before powering it on again. If the transmission repeats, turn off the radio and do not use it until sunrise. Emergency Protocol 3. If you see yourself through any window, do not look away. Maintain eye contact until the image disappears, or until sunrise, whichever comes first. Do not blink more than once every 30 seconds. If you cannot maintain this, cover the window with a blanket and do not remove it until sunrise. Emergency Protocol 4. If the cabin door opens without being unlocked, close it immediately and brace it with the heaviest object available. Do not investigate the cause. Do not look through the gap while the door is open. Emergency Protocol 5. If multiple appearances manifest simultaneously outside the cabin, count them aloud. Do not lose count. If you lose count, begin again from 1. Continue counting until all appearances have departed or until sunrise. These protocols supersede standard rules during declared emergencies. Dispatch continued. An emergency will be declared by radio transmission using the phrase Sector 14, condition critical. Upon hearing this phrase, suspend all standard operations and implement emergency protocols immediately. I asked what conditions would trigger a declaration. Weather events, dispatch said. Power failures, communication outages, unusual activity thresholds. You will be notified. I did not ask what constituted an unusual activity threshold. I suspected I would know when I saw it. Christmas came and went without acknowledgement. I had no one to celebrate with, no decorations, no reason to mark the day except a small note in the log, December 25th. No incidents. New Year's Eve was different. At 11:47 that night, the footsteps began. I counted them as I lay on the cot. 23, 41, 67, 89. The rhythm was faster than usual, more urgent. I watched my watch and counted. 100, 112, 128, 144. The footsteps did not stop. 150, 163, 179. The count kept climbing. 200, 218, 240. I reached for the radio. My hand was steady, but my heart was not. 14 Alpha to base, code black, footstep count at 240 and rising. Static, then faintly. 14 Alpha, confirm count. 252, still rising. More static, a different voice, younger, uncertain. 14 Alpha, stand by, checking with... The voice cut off. The static continued for 3 seconds, then silence, total silence. The footsteps stopped at 264. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5. The radio remained silent. The perimeter lights remained on. Nothing moved outside the windows. At 12:07, the lights went out. I moved to the center of the cabin and opened my supply kit. The salt container was full. I had verified it that morning. I poured a circle on the floor, 3 feet in diameter, and stepped inside. I sat down with my back to the stove and my face to the door. The silence was absolute. No wind, no generator, no hum of electronics. Even my own breathing seemed muffled, as though the cabin had been sealed in cotton. At 12:15, the radio crackled. 14 Alpha. The voice was mine. My exact voice. My exact cadence. 14 Alpha. This is dispatch. Confirm status. I did not respond. Emergency Protocol 2. Do not respond to transmissions on unauthorized channels, except this was channel 4. This was the correct channel. This was... The voice came again. 14 Alpha, this is dispatch. Confirm status. Acknowledge immediately. My hand hovered over the radio. The voice was perfect. The procedure was correct. But the tone was wrong. Too smooth, too patient. Dispatch was never patient. Dispatch was clipped and professional and mildly annoyed. I turned off the radio. The darkness pressed in. I could see nothing beyond the faint glow of the wood stove. The curtain was drawn. The clips were secure. I had checked them at 11. I had checked them twice. At 12:31, I heard the door latch click. It was a soft sound, almost gentle. The kind of sound a door makes when someone turns the handle from outside. I watched the door in the darkness and saw nothing. The latch clicked again, then again. The door did not open. At 12:47, a light appeared at the observation window. Not the perimeter lights, those were still dead. This was different. A faint glow, bluish white, moving slowly across the curtain. I tracked its progress without turning my head. Left to right. It paused at the center of the window, directly behind the drawn curtain, and held there. I could see shadows through the fabric, a shape, vaguely human, vaguely wrong. Emergency Protocol 3 had a condition I had not considered. What if the image was on the other side of a drawn curtain? What if I could see it, but not clearly? Did that count as seeing myself? The shape did not move, neither did I. At 1:09, the shape withdrew. The light faded. The shadows on the curtain resolved into nothing. I remained in the salt circle with my eyes on the window and my hands on my knees. The perimeter lights came back on at 1:33. The radio hummed to life at 1:35. The generator coughed and resumed its usual rhythm at 1:38. I waited until sunrise to leave the circle. The morning check-in was unremarkable. Dispatch acknowledged my report. The extended count, the blackout, the unauthorized voice. Without comment. They logged everything and told me to continue standard operations. I asked about the transmission I had received. We did not transmit to 14 Alpha between 11:52 and 6:03, dispatch said. All communications during that window are logged as non-responsive. Your radio was recorded as offline at 12:17. I received a transmission at 12:15, I said. My own voice, asking for status confirmation. A pause. Then, log it. Continue standard operations. I logged it. I continued. The pattern of that night repeated twice more in January. Each time, the footsteps exceeded 200. Each time, the lights failed. Each time, the radio transmitted voices that were not dispatch. I learned to recognize the signs. The acceleration of the footstep rhythm. The subtle dimming of the perimeter lights in the minutes before failure. The way the wind seemed to die just before the silence fell. I also learned the duration. The events lasted between 45 minutes and 2 hours. The lights always returned before sunrise. The radio always came back online within 20 minutes of the lights. I learned to survive. On February 3rd, I received a visitor I had not expected. The radio crackled at 2 in the afternoon with a transmission that was not a check-in. 14 Alpha, be advised. Single civilian approaching your position from the southwest. Female, approximately 40 years of age. No visible equipment. Verify and report. I grabbed my binoculars and stepped onto the porch. The southwestern trail came out of the trees about 200 yards away. I could see a figure moving along it, walking steadily, wearing clothing that was not standard issue. I waited until she was within 50 feet, then raised my hand. Hold there, name and purpose. The woman stopped. She was not 40, closer to 50, with gray streaking her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. She wore a heavy coat over civilian clothes. No badge, no identification visible. "My name is Margaret Chen," she said. "I'm looking for my son." I felt the cold settle into my spine. "Your son is Michael Chen?" "Yes, he was assigned to Sector 11 2 months ago. The regional office says he checked in 3 days ago, but I received a letter from him dated January 15th. He wrote that he was afraid, that he saw something he couldn't explain, that he needed to come home." I thought about the jacket on my porch, the tag reading Chen, M. "Ma'am, I need you to answer some questions. Standard verification. What is today's date?" "February 3rd. What is your son's badge number?" 9153. "When was the last time you spoke to him in person?" She hesitated. "November 29th, the day before he left for his assignment." November 29th, 2 days before his scheduled departure. But Chen had been with me on November 28th through December 1st. He had completed his orientation. He had loaded his gear into Rivera's truck. I lowered the binoculars. "Ma'am, your son completed his training with me and departed for Sector 11 on December 1st. I watched him leave. I verified his transport. I know what the records say." Her voice cracked. "But I know my son. I know his handwriting. He wrote that letter. He's scared. Something is wrong. I should have radioed dispatch. I should have followed Rule 2 and maintained my distance. I should have done a dozen things that the guidelines required. Instead, I said, 'Come inside. We need to talk.'" Margaret Chen sat at my desk and told me about the letter. It had arrived at her home in Portland on January 20th, postmarked from a town 40 miles from Sector 11. The handwriting was Michael's. She had compared it to birthday cards, school essays, the note he had left when he moved out at 22. The content was scattered, anxious, unlike anything her son had written before. I read the letter. She had brought it with her. "Mom, I don't know if this will reach you. I don't know if I'm supposed to write. They have rules here. So many rules. I've been following them. I've been doing everything right. But I saw something last night that I can't explain. I saw myself standing at the edge of the trail. Not a reflection, not a trick of light. Myself. It was wearing my jacket. It had my face. It knew my name. I'm afraid to radio dispatch. I'm afraid of what they'll say. I'm afraid they'll tell me to continue standard operations. I'm afraid that's the wrong thing to do. I think something is trying to take my place. I think if I don't leave, it will succeed. Please help me. Please come get me. Please don't let them send someone else. I love you. Michael." I set the letter down. "Mrs. Chen, I need to contact my supervisors. I've tried contacting them. They won't tell me anything. They say he's fine. They say he checked in this morning, but I know my son." She gripped the edge of the desk. "A mother knows." I thought about the voice that had called my name, using my mother's cadence. I thought about the rules. I thought about Rule 2 specifically. The requirement to verify identity before approaching. The insistence that some appearances were not what they seemed. I thought about what would happen if the wrong thing had taken Michael Chen's place and was now sitting in a cabin in Sector 11. answering radio check-ins with a voice that wasn't quite right. "I can make some inquiries," I said, "but I need you to leave. This sector isn't safe for civilians. You shouldn't have come here." "I drove 11 hours. I understand, but the rules exist for a reason. If something happens to you here, I can't protect you. The protocols don't allow it." She stared at me. I watched the hope drain from her face, replaced by something harder. "You're not going to help me. I'm going to follow the proper channels. That's the only kind of help I can offer." She stood. Her chair scraped against the floor. She walked to the door and stopped with her hand on the latch. "What happened to Harold Vance?" I did not answer. "I looked him up," she continued. "The warden before you. He requested a transfer last August. Paperwork went through. But no one can tell me where he transferred to. No one can tell me if he's still working. No one can tell me anything. I don't know what happened to Harold Vance." "No." She opened the door. "You just follow the rules." She left. I watched her walk to her car, a blue sedan with Oregon plates, and drive down the fire road until the trees swallowed her. I radioed dispatch and reported the contact. They logged it and told me to continue standard operations. That night, I could not sleep. I lay on the cot and thought about the letter, about the handwriting that matched, about the fear in those sentences, about the jacket that had appeared on my porch, bearing Chen's name and badge number. I thought about Rule 14. People sometimes appear in Sector 14 who have already left, or who are currently assigned elsewhere, or who do not exist in any personnel record. I thought about what it meant to be replaced. At 2 a.m, I got up and walked to the radio. I switched to Channel 6, a channel I had never used, a channel that was not authorized for routine communications, and keyed the mic. "Sector 11, this is 14 Alpha, requesting status check on 11 Bravo." Static. Long seconds of empty hiss. Then faintly, a voice. 14 Alpha, this is 11 Bravo. Status is sector clear. Is there a problem? The voice was Chen's. Or close enough. The cadence, the tone, the slight hesitation before the question. It sounded right. But the code was wrong. 11 Bravo should have used the morning verification phrase, "Sunrise confirmed," before asking a follow-up question. It was in the protocols. It was in every orientation. Chen knew this. I had taught him. "Negative 11 Bravo, I said. "Just a routine check. 14 Alpha clear." I switched off the radio. I did not sleep at all. In the morning, I radioed dispatch on the proper channel and reported what I had done. I expected a reprimand. Channel 6 was restricted, unauthorized, potentially dangerous. Instead, dispatch was silent for 8 seconds. 14 Alpha, confirm you made contact with 11 Bravo on Channel 6 at approximately 0200. Confirmed. Confirm the response used standard verification protocols? Negative. Response did not include morning verification phrase. Another silence. Then, stand by for instruction. I stood by. The radio hummed. Minutes passed. At 7:14, dispatch returned. 14 Alpha, be advised, Sector 11 Warden reported a communication anomaly at 0212 this morning. A voice claiming to be 11 Bravo transmitted on Channel 6 without authorization. The actual 11 Bravo was asleep at the time. My throat tightened. Then who did I speak to? Unknown. Log the incident. Continue standard operations. I logged the incident. I did not continue standard operations. Instead, I sat at my desk and stared at the map and tried to understand what I had done. I had reached out. I had used a restricted channel. and something had answered. Something that knew Chen's voice. Something that knew his call sign. Something that was listening, always listening, for exactly this kind of contact. I had given it an opening, and I did not know what it would do next. The answer came 3 days later. I was on patrol in Grid 4, halfway through the Eastern Loop, when I saw the cabin. It was not on my map. It had not been there before. I had walked this exact trail 6 times in the past 2 months, and there had been nothing but trees and rocks and the frozen creek bed. Now there was a cabin, identical to mine. Metal roof, solar array, green paint peeling from the walls. I stopped at the edge of the trail and raised my binoculars. The door was closed. The windows were dark. A thin curl of smoke rose from the chimney. Rule 6 said I could not leave the trail for any reason. Rule 12 said I could not touch items that did not belong to me, but no rule addressed what to do when the sector itself changed, when a building appeared where no building should exist. I radioed dispatch. 14 Alpha to base. I have a visual anomaly in Grid 4. A cabin has appeared at coordinates unknown. Request guidance. Static. Then, 14 Alpha, confirm the structure. Describe dimensions and features. Structure appears identical to the Sector 14 Warden cabin. Single story, metal roof, solar panels on the south face. Smoke from chimney suggests occupation. Distance from trail approximately 30 feet. A pause. Longer than usual. 14 Alpha, do not approach. Do not leave the trail. Mark the location on your map and return to your cabin immediately. A response team will be dispatched. Understood. 14 Alpha, returning to base. I lowered the binoculars and turned back up the trail. As I did, I heard a sound. A door opening. I did not look back. I walked at a normal pace, counting my steps, keeping my eyes on the trail markers ahead. 20 steps, 40, 60. The sound of footsteps behind me, not matching my rhythm, but close, following. 80 steps, 100. The footsteps were closer now. I could hear breathing, not labored, not aggressive, just present. Just there. 120 steps. The clearing came into view. My cabin, my truck. The perimeter lights, dull in the afternoon sun. I did not run. Rule 2 said walk at a normal pace without looking back. I walked. The footsteps stopped at 152. I reached the cabin, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. Then I crossed to the observation window. It was still daylight, the curtain was not drawn, and looked out at the clearing. Nothing. The tree line was empty. The fire road was empty. The only movement was the wind in the branches. I radioed dispatch and reported. They acknowledged and told me the response team would arrive by nightfall. The team arrived at 4:47, 3 trucks, 6 personnel. Torres led the sweep. I watched from the porch as they headed into Grid 4 with their equipment and their radios and their certainty. They were gone 4 hours. When they returned, Torres walked to my cabin without speaking to the others. His face was pale under the work lights. "The cabin's gone," he said. I stared at him. "There's nothing there. No structure, no foundation, no signs of construction. Just trees and the creek bed. Exactly like it should be. I saw it. I heard the door open. I heard footsteps." "I'm not saying you didn't." Torres ran a hand over his face. "I'm saying it's not there now. Whatever you saw, it's moved." "Moved where?" Torres did not answer. He climbed into his truck and drove away without another word. That night, I updated my log with everything I had observed. The cabin, the smoke, the footsteps, the disappearance. I also wrote a note to myself in the margin. They're getting closer. They're learning. The rules kept them out. Now they're trying to make their own way in. February ended. March began. The snow started to thaw. On March 9th, I received a new set of amendments. Amendment 9. The sector map must now be verified daily. If any feature has changed position by more than 10%, radio dispatch immediately with a code black. Amendment 10. If you encounter any structure that does not appear on the map, do not approach, do not investigate, do not enter. Return to your cabin and await instructions. Amendment 11. If you hear footsteps that match your own pace exactly, stop walking. Count to 30. Resume at a different pace. Amendment 12. The observation window may no longer be used after 3 in the afternoon. Draw the curtain at 2:45 regardless of remaining daylight. Amendment 13. If any personnel appear with insignia that does not match current design, do not verify. Retreat immediately. Do not engage. I memorized them. I followed them. I continued. On March 15th, I received orders for my replacement. The transmission came during the morning check-in. 14 Alpha, be advised. Your rotation ends April 1st. A replacement warden will arrive March 30th for orientation. Prepare handoff documentation. 14 months. That was how long I had lasted. Longer than Vance, according to the composition book. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I cleaned the cabin. I inventoried every supply, every key, every piece of equipment. I wrote a new set of notes, not like Vance's scattered observations, but a structured document, page by page, rule by rule, amendment by amendment. I wrote about the voices, about the footsteps, about the figure with Chen's face, about the cabin that appeared and disappeared. I wrote about Margaret Chen's visit, about the letter, about the unauthorized transmission. I wrote about everything I had learned in 14 months of following rules in a place where the rules were the only thing between survival and something else. On March 30th, the truck appeared on the fire road at 9 in the morning. I watched from the porch as it pulled into the clearing. One figure emerged, young, male, with the same uncertain posture Chen had worn on his first day. Hold there, I said. Name and identification. Park, trainee, badge number 7824. I verified the badge, checked the emblem, mountain, 4 trees. Asked the date, asked the verification phrase. Everything matched. Welcome to Sector 14, I said. I'm going to teach you how to survive. The orientation took 2 days. I walked Park through every rule, every amendment, every protocol. I showed him the map, the radio, the supply shed. I explained the timing, the distances, the counts. He asked the same questions Chen had asked, the same questions I had asked in my own mind during my first weeks. What are they? Follow the rules, I said. That's the only answer that matters. On the last night, we sat at the desk together, reviewing the final documentation. Outside, the sun was setting. I had drawn the curtain at 2:45 per Amendment 12. You're going to hear things, I said. You're going to see things. Some of them will feel real. Some of them will feel like people you know, people you trust, people you love. Park nodded. They're not. They never are. The rules are what separate you from them. Break the rules, and you're on their side of the line. Follow the rules, and you're on yours. And if the rules aren't enough, I thought about the cabin in Grid 4, the footsteps that matched my pace, the voice that sounded like mine. Then you make new rules, I said, and you follow those instead. Rivera arrived the next morning to drive me back to the regional office. I loaded my gear into her truck and climbed into the passenger seat. Park stood on the porch, watching. "Check-ins at 6, 12, 6, and 11, I called to him. "Radio silence between 2 and 3. Don't look through the north window after dark. Count everything. Document everything. Trust nothing." He raised a hand. "Good luck, 14 Bravo." 14 Alpha clear, I replied. The truck pulled away. I watched the cabin shrink in the mirror until the trees swallowed it. Rivera drove in silence for 40 minutes. Then she glanced at me. "You made it." I did not answer. "Most don't last the winter. Vance was the longest before you. 8 months. You did 14. Dispatch is impressed." I followed the rules. Most do. Most still don't make it. I thought about the composition book, the scattered notes, the fear that bled through every margin annotation. Vance didn't transfer, did he? Rivera's hands tightened on the wheel. That's above my pay grade. But you know, she was quiet for a long time. Then, he started following his own rules, started making changes to the protocols without authorization. Dispatch found his logs after he stopped checking in. Half of them didn't match the official guidelines. Half of them contradicted the amendments. And when the sweep team reached his cabin, they found him sitting at the desk, alive, breathing, eyes open. But when they asked him the verification questions, he couldn't answer, couldn't remember his name, couldn't remember the date, couldn't remember anything except the rules he'd written himself. I stared at the road ahead. Where is he now? He's still in the system, still employed, still checking in on schedule according to the records. Rivera's voice was flat. But no one's seen him since August, and no one asks where the check-ins are coming from. The trees thinned, the road widened, the GPS signal returned. "You did everything right," Rivera said. "You followed the rules. You survived. That's more than most can say." I nodded, but I did not feel like I had survived. I felt like I had been marked. I am back in Portland now. Desk job, like they promised. Paperwork and phone calls and meetings that stretch into the afternoon. Normal work, normal hours, normal life. Except, last night, I woke at 2:14 in the morning. No alarm, no reason. Just awake, staring at the ceiling, counting my heartbeat. At 2:17, I heard footsteps outside my apartment, a steady rhythm circling the building. I counted them out of habit, 144. Exactly. I lay still until dawn. This morning, I found a note on my doorstep, my name on the front. Handwriting I did not recognize. I burned it without reading. The rules are still with me. They will always be with me. And somewhere, in a cabin in the mountains, Park is following them too. I hope he counts carefully. I hope he does not look through the window. I hope he remembers that the voices are never what they seem. I hope he lasts longer than I did. But most of all, I hope he never learns what I finally understand. The rules do not keep us safe. The rules only keep us separate. And the space between us and them is getting smaller every day. Last week, I passed a woman on the street, middle-aged, gray in her hair, lines around her eyes. She looked at me and stopped walking. "Have you seen my son?" I kept walking, normal pace, eyes forward. I did not answer. I did not look back.